via the southern border. Joining me now is Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty. He's a member of the House Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, Foreign Relations, and Appropriations and Rules Committees. Senator, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining me.
It's good to be with you, Maria.
Yeah, I want to get your take on where we stand. You're hearing Christopher Wray tell us every week, it feels like, that we are watching an open border that is putting America in jeopardy. We've got now these 8 people that were just arrested because there was a sting operation that they were heard talking about bombs. And I want to get your take on where we stand with this open border. Should we be worried about a potential terrorist attack on America?
Maria, you and I have been talking about this since 2021 when Joe Biden opened the border. This was the obvious outcome. The national security risk that Joe Biden has precipitated for America is enormous. It's the greatest national security risk that we face as a nation. I saw a Democrat councilman from New York earlier on your show talking about the fact that this could be the next 9/11. Look, the American public should be deeply concerned about this, and they should understand where the responsibility lies. And that's at the feet of Joe Biden and the Democrats. Joe Biden came in his first 100 days, used 94 executive orders to take down the most secure border that we've ever had under President Trump. Biden has had a vendetta against the American public, I presume. This is all about rearranging and changing the electorate in America to favor Democrats, and he's willing to expose us to this type of national security threat. So it's just shocking. What
do you want to say to someone like Representative Debbie Dingell, who I just had on, and we talked about this, and she says, well, it's Donald Trump's fault?
It's amazing that the Democrats could even think that the American public would believe this gaslighting. The Democrats have been exactly voting for the fact that they want to count these illegals in the census. They're voting for the fact that they want to continue to fly these people in here illegally. They support the use of the CBP-1 app. These 8 terrorists, some of them even use that application, use that app on their phones to come in and get the Biden administration concierge service to deliver them right into America here. It's absolutely preposterous, and the Democrats need to stand back, own this the way they should. The American public are going to see that they do in November. I predict that. So
you believe that we will have a completely new border policy after the election? You believe President Trump will win? Is that what you're saying?
I'm certain of that, Maria.
Okay.
The momentum is behind President Trump right now. I think this is one of the major issues that face the American public. It's our safety. It's our national security. They can see that he delivered a secure border. They see the crime in our cities right now. They see this type of threat with these 8 terrorists coming here. They want it fixed, and they know that there's only one person that can do that, and that's Donald Trump.
Well, look, he's going to get sentenced on July 11th, just a few days before the Republican National Convention. Do you believe that President Trump will face jail time?
It's hard to say what will happen here, but I've talked with President Trump about this extensively. It's amazing that he is going to continue to fight for the American public. He understands that the American people can see he's standing for them. He's the only thing standing between the American public and this use of lawfare against every citizen. The Biden administration is willing to weaponize the entirety of the government.
Well, look, the former president is going to be meeting with your colleagues and yourself, Senate Republicans, later today. He's in Washington, D.C. for a business roundtable meeting. He's expected to address plans for the summer and discuss ideas for a strategic GOP governing agenda in 2025. Yes. Senator Hagerty, what do you want to hear from the president? What kind of agenda would you like to see for the GOP in 25?
We've got to be shoulder to shoulder and ready to go on day one. President Trump will be ready to issue the executive orders necessary to bring our economy back, to bring our national security back, to put us on the right footing with respect to international foreign affairs. The Biden administration has basically set the world on fire, and it's got to be fixed. It has to be fixed fast. The U.S. Senate, the legislative branch, needs to be ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with President Trump. That means we need to be ready to move immediately. Those first 100 days are going to be critical. We need to have unity right now and be preparing for what will happen and what we'll need to undertake to get our country back in a position to thrive again.
And of course, illegal immigration is an issue across the world right now. President Biden is in Italy today for the start of the G7. This is the 50th G7 summit. The alliance reportedly expected to make a statement calling on China to stop helping Russia's war in Ukraine. Bloomberg writes that the G7 is expected to urge Beijing to, quote, push Russia to withdraw from Ukraine and support a just peace. The alliance also expected to warn small Chinese banks over their ties to Moscow. I want to get your take on that, but largely speaking on the immigration issue, I spoke with the Prime Minister of Italy last year, and she mentioned the immigration issue as her priority, trying to stop illegal migrants coming from North Africa. And here's part of that interview with Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni.
Sure.
Next year, Italy will take the leadership in the G7. What are you expecting? What do you want to see from the other members?
In my opinion, we weren't enough concentrated was Africa. I say it for I'm the direct neighbor, but first of all, Africa is not a poor continent. It's not. It is a continent that has many, many resources. Moreover, rare earth, metals, raw materials, 50% of arable lands. We're not taking care of that.
And with regard to Africa, the issue of China comes up.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about that. Is China dominating or trying to dominate the continent and scooping up some of those raw materials and metals that you mentioned that are so critical to technology?
Absolutely, China has an important presence at the time in Africa.
Senator, what's your take on what went on in Europe this last week? You've got Prime Minister Meloni hosting the G7 in Italy after a huge success in European parliamentary elections this last week. Conservatism coming really strongly in those elections. Your take?
My take is the same thing that's going to happen here in America. As the public sees that these liberal policies don't work, as they see their national sovereignty invaded, and you think about what's happening to their economy, they need a change. They're voting for it there. We're going to see that happen here in America as well. And Maria, if I could go back for just a moment regarding sanctions enforcement and China. You think about the G7 calling on China to stop helping Russia. When President Trump was in office, we had a Treasury Department and a Treasury Secretary that would enforce the sanctions. I had Janet Yellen in front of me last week. She talked about issuing sanctions against China, but they failed completely because you have to enforce the sanctions. And this administration will not do so. We have to get back into the enforcement business again. It's hard work. They're not willing to do it. President Trump's administration is going to be, I think, first and foremost focused on enforcing the sanctions and stopping the flow of funds to Russia, to Iran, and to other terrorist teams.
Why do you think they are unwilling to put the sanctions in place?
Well, if you look at what's happened with Iran, as soon as the Biden administration came into office, they removed the maximum pressure campaign. The sanctions are still in place. They just stopped enforcing them. That's enabled terrorism to break out in the Middle East. We're now at war in the Middle East, thanks to the fact that we're not enforcing the sanctions. That type of behavior could be stopped immediately if we would just enforce the law in the books.
No, it's great to see you this morning, Senator. We'll be watching your work. Thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Senator Bill Hagerty in D.C. And, of course,